her true face hidden. Now, she cannot escape.
Ready, exile! It is time to hunt! You are well prepared for the end. This is a fine capture.
To fight. It is shadow. Rise and fight. Mortal flesh is so fallible. A mote of my might. Potential for the ages.
Hello and welcome exiles to my second build for the 10 div challenge at doing basically 6-7 hour play session, throw a character together, gear it up in 10 divs, and attempt Ubers. Now this character is a lightning trap trickster. Now originally when I was making this character, I wasn't even playing on lightning trap. I was playing on maybe an ice trap is what I was thinking, but I adjusted based on what was available on the market. And this is something I'd recommend a lot of times is sometimes there are items that would be good for your build, like Restless Ward would be good for my build. There was a +4 Restless Ward that would have worked for Ice Trap, but the guy was AFK. It was 10C. Restless Ward isn't a particularly popular chest, but it's actually pretty good with Trickster. And there was a +4 for Lightning Trap for 50C. So I said, you know what? I'm going to adjust my build, and I'm going to pivot to something that will take advantage of this chest piece, because, you know, why not? I've never played Lightning Trap before. I'll give it a try, and that's what I ended up doing. Probably, I don't know if this ended up improving the build or not, but a lot of times there are good chest corruptions like this on the market for your build. Not necessarily going to be on the top tier base, but even on a sub tier base, a +4 often outscales the value or makes the value of that item go up significantly. Now, the character is using Lightning Trap with the defensive layers of 3 Elemental Flasks, 87 max all res, 42k evasion, Ghost Shroud, and Spell Suppress for 66% when I have full energy shield, which is a lot of the time, and Trickster Spell Suppress, if you haven't used it before, feels very, very good. I think the only thing I would change with this character, instead of doing a invocation for Wind Dancer, which is what I did because it was a 30C invocation, I should have probably gone for an invocation for Wicked Ward if that was cheap as well. That would have probably been my basically, I think that would have been a better choice, because ultimately, the few times I died to repeat spells is if they hit me a bunch right in a row, and I'd hit the first hit would give me Spell Surprise, or the recharge start by Spell Surprise, and the recharge would start, but I'd get hit right after that, and I would then turn off the recharge. So if I went Wicked Ward, that probably would have prevented some of my deaths that I had on this character. This character was a 5 out of 7 Ubers. I bricked Uber Cortex and Uber Exarch. Exarch I had in cull range, but I forgot to put cull on a skill that I could control and proc. So I bricked the Exarch, and then Uber Cortex, I low rolled and I got an 80 all res Uber Cortex with another couple bad mods. I think it was like gain 200% Fizzes extra. But not only that, during the ad phase, it spawned a Soul Eater with life regen. I should have thought fast and think, you know what, the first time I died during this, I should go get a Frost Bomb to negate this monster's regen. Point is, that Soul Eater monster was tankier than any one of the unique bosses and added a whole bunch of spam. And I just fantastically low rolled on your cortex. Realistically, I think cortex should have been one of the easier fights for me to do, but I got super screwed on RNG there, and that's just how it goes. And I want to say super screwed because the reason 80 all res was particularly bad for my character is because what I opted to do for this character is something I wanted to try out, was I opted to go for Leadership's Price for Scorch for minus 30 res, and then Conductivity for minus 40 res. I could have gone for LE Weakness as well, which I was opting. I was trying to decide whether or not LE Weakness would be better than Sniper's Mark. Ultimately, Path of Building could probably tell me which one does more damage. I ended up opting to think maybe Sniper's Mark is more damage, and that's what I went with. But point is, I was planning to lower the enemy's res a lot so I wouldn't have to pen them, and then take advantage of Abhorrent Interrogation for the Elemental Wither. Ultimately, I think this was a mistake because I couldn't fit in balance a terror for the 100% chance to wither on hit. I was too tight on jewel sockets. So I think this ended up just being a subpar gear slot. It made me not use pen in my character. And pen, if I had lightning pen on that fight, it would have multiplied my damage by 150% more damage for the cortex fight. And I wouldn't have bricked the fight. You know, I would have killed the bosses much, much faster. And it wouldn't have been an end-up brick, because I got to the last phase in the fight, and I got both of the bosses down to like half HP on the last phase. If I was doing 150% more damage, I'm pretty sure I would have cleared the fight, you know, stuff like that. Abhorrent Interrogation, it was just something I wanted to try out. I think there's something here for Abhorrent Interrogation, maybe on like an Occultist or an Elementalist, where you actually negate enemies' resistances even further. You stack Curse, you stack a double Curse, you stack Scorch, you stack the minus res from Occultist, minus res from Elementalist, and then maybe you go for something like a oh, the helmet that I'm forgetting the name of, I have Malice, something like that, minus the res a whole bunch, and then Abhorrent Interrogation for an elemental damage build is actually pretty good. It's like a 60% shock if you have full wither up. You could even get the ability to scale wither effect, which I think might work with this. I'm not 100% sure. Point is, it could be pretty good for an elemental build. All in all, I'm pretty happy with how this character performed. It is very, very tanky to anything that's elemental damage, anything spell related. Very, very tanky. The one thing this character dies to is big physical attack hits. And mostly this is pretty much just like a Shaper Slam, an Elder Slam, or the tentacle whips of Eater. I know there's a few different high fizz hits that are in each of the Ubers. Basically, they're very dodgeable. I very rarely died to the fizz hits. Mostly the things I died to were something like exarch ball phase, where you just get hit by ball after ball after ball after ball, and that's a lot of damage. Unless you really have like a transcendent setup, you're not going to tank those. The other scenario is Cirrus. I would stand in the ground degen of Cirrus. That's one of the main things I died to in Cirrus, is I would just stand in the ground degen, and then I would eat an entire die beam while being in the ground degen, while being in the 5-way laser thing. I still ended up clearing Cirrus. It was 5 deaths. It wasn't pretty. Like, basically got him down to like 30% HP in the last phase, and then I chain died 5 times in a row, and then I finished off the fight. It was a little bit embarrassing, but we didn't end up fully choking. I choked on Exarch. I didn't choke on Eater, or not Eater. I didn't choke on Cirrus. I almost choked. So this is the setup I went for. And I really like Trickster for trapping. I really like Trickster for mining. I just personally think Trickster is a better all-around ascendancy than Saboteur in a lot of cases. I am addicted to the evasion energy shield defensive set. I think it's so incredibly strong. So that's why I often gravitate towards this sort of character to build. And this is what you can expect if you are shopping and really stretching your money as far as it will go. I did things like buying Sunblast for Tensi, and 3-to-1 vendoring, trying to get basically a higher roll Sunblast. Sunblast is a belt that gives you 2 additional trap throws, but the traps can't be triggered, which means you have to generate charges via skitterbots, triggering your traps, or via what I did, which is a boot swap initially. And my charges last 40 seconds. So basically, once I do the boot swap, the trigger by the skitterbots will occur, and that will maintain my charges for the rest of the fight. And then stuff like Trickster's just all around feels good note of 1 step ahead. This takes something like the Elder Suck, the slow thing he does in the Uber Elder fight, which is usually the scenario where you're going to die. He Elder Sucks you and then Shaper hits you with balls from the side type of thing. This just makes that not a problem. The Eater of Worlds balls that suck and slow you down, those don't slow you down. Stuff like this is just a quality of life node. Ultimately, Polymath is a bit more damage, right? But I opted for this just because of the smoothness and the feels good it gives to the character. I really like it, and it slows down the bosses a little bit, which also helps make the build just that bit better. That being said, the slow this is providing isn't even more than the chill I'm getting from skitterbots, so ultimately, yeah, I can't really factor the slow and say it's a good thing. I just mainly like the action speed boost and the ability to not get slowed by all those annoying ground effects and suck of elder and whatnot. So this is the setup I went for the character. I also opted to go for Fire Song for my ailments. Fire Song is a cool jewel. It's a couple chaos, and I ultimately think it's one of the best cheap ways to deal with ailments. The only scenario where this bites you in the butt is, I believe, ground ailments like ailment shock or shock ground, or something like a Cirrus where I think he has a pretty big increased duration on the ailments he inflicts on you, but ultimately this pretty much negates the ailments quite cleanly, and all you really need is you need a abbhorent for less duration if you don't have completely capped reduced duration, or if you go ahead and get ignite reduced duration on you, you can get this. I think I only had lesser because I was doing this on a budget. I wasn't trying to spend money upgrading tiers of currency, but point is, if you get a greater version of this, I think it goes up to 40% reduced ignite duration. You combine that with a top roll reduced ignite duration on you, and every single elemental ailment, it's going to be 0 duration and it's not going to occur on you. The only scenarios where it stays on you is ground effects and enemies that have the ability to inflict ailments with increased duration, which that is as far as I know, that's not a very common thing, and I felt pretty good while playing this character. We also did a melding setup with Leadership's Price. Leadership's Price is great because you can get +3 max res of a certain ailment or a certain res. We went for max lightning res because we get max lightning res from the unnatural calm here, and then we got max lightning res on our shield. With shield, we looked around on the market for, bought this for a div, thought that was a pretty good deal. We threw it on, and that was our shield. And then you get max lightning res from Purity of Lightning, and from our relic we had a +2 max lightning res sitting around, and that's what we went with, and that's how we ended up with a character with 87 max all res. I opted for Balbala. I am a sucker. The reason, okay, if I was gonna fit in the res for melding, I needed Balbala for these res flasks. And the other thing that was super cool when I was setting up this character is I noticed when I was testing out my spot I was planning to do Balbala, it was literally the exact amount of dex I needed to balance my top 2 attributes. I originally had a dex node over here to balance them. So it was kind of funny to realize that I actually balanced my dex nodes perfectly with 30 dex from these nodes I have here on the tree, which I thought, hey, that's a win right there. Because you need to balance your top 2 attributes to get Leadership's Price, which gives you Brittle, Scorch, and Sap, which are all good things. So this is the character I went for. Ultimately, if you're going to make this a more well-rounded, fun-to-play mapping character, I probably would go for a Quicksilver Flask, and I would probably go for the Flask nodes here to cap out the sustain and make it so you can run a Quicksilver as well as the Tri-Elemental. But this character is quite tanky. CI, high max LE res, giga suppress, good evasion. If you fit in a Watcher's Eye, you could probably cap evade as well. Stuff like that starts to feel very, very good defensively, and the only thing that's ever going to kill you is a very, very big fizz hit that goes through your evasion, which just doesn't happen very often. So, as always, hopefully you enjoyed the video of my build number 2. Here, I will give you guys, I'll cut to it. I need to go track it down. I'll cut to it, but I'll show you guys the 10 div challenge, like, I guess, Google Sheet, where we're keeping track of where we are, and I can show you some of the Ruetoo builds that he's done so far, and maybe Tripolar Bear's done a couple of his builds. I don't know if he's done his yet. Alright, here we are with the Google Sheet. I'll have a link for this in the description below, but basically, so far, Ruetoo has done a Pathfinder Doom, Cadigan's Crown, and he used not, what the hell is it called? Void Forge, Star Forge, Echo Forge. He used an Echo Forge with Battle Mage with Cadigans for Doom Blast, which is pretty cool. He did 6 out of 8 with that one. He could have done 8 out of 8 if he didn't get unlucky with Cortex, and if he played a little bit on Maven. He got a bleed something or other that kept killing him, basically. It was a pretty bad boss roll on that. Similarly to how I low rolled on Cortex and I got a Uber Soul Eater rare, and that's just how it goes. Sometimes you get unlucky, and just your build has to be extremely good to even beat the unlucky scenarios, right? And then he did a Champ Ancestral War Chief, which I was thankful he decided to do totems, because totems are trash on bosses, and he got punished for it because totems, they just get wrecked. And conceptually they look good in PUB, numbers wise they make sense in PUB, but in practice, when you play those things in Ubers, they get deleted. You spawn them, they get killed. You spawn them, they get killed. You spawn them, they get killed, and you get killed. So that's probably why I only got 3 out of 8 there. It was probably a pretty solid build up until the totems start dying, would be my guess. And then I did a Forbidden Right Guardian yesterday, and I did 2 out of 8. The point system is basically 7 points for each of the 7 Ubers, and then there's basically a litmus test to make sure you're not doing a ZHP character, which is doing 5 T16 maps in a row without dying. It's not really that hard of a threshold in comparison to doing the Uber bosses. It's a complete cakewalk, but It's kind of something that you have to put in there as a litmus test to say, hey, we're not doing this just to have some ZHP builds or some basically cast on death builds just to kill Ubers, like stuff like that. We're trying to avoid doing just meta cuckery and stuff like that. We're trying to play strong, new, original builds, and that's the goal of the thing. And I guess Tripolar Bear hasn't done his first one yet, but he will be doing it soon. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you enjoyed this series of videos on the 10 div challenge for Ubers in a one play session time of creating a build and just going for it. Hopefully you guys enjoy. As always, take care, Exiles. Peace out.